Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 10,000 Heroes. So I actually haven't done this in a while, and it's not because I haven't been recording things or reading things, but I just haven't felt that oomph of inspiration. And yesterday I talked to an old friend and mentor of mine, John Giuliano, who's been on the show a few times, and he gave me an update as to the situation in El Salvador and his coworker Santos, who was detained 54 days ago. And so his response, I mean, not just the situation, which is horrible. There's a lot of horrible situations in the world, and that doesn't particularly inspire me, even though I know and care about the person. But his response is, it's my concept of the future. He just went full Gandhian on this shit, and it's really, really inspiring. So this interview has two parts. The first part is the situation, the update with Santos, and the second part is John, the spiritual dimension, the transcendent approach to revenge and justice, and that's the second part. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that really gives me fuel to continue with the minor conflicts of the things that I'm seeing in my life, and I'm not having to deal with anything near as serious as what John's fears are for his own safety or for Santos. So thank you, John, and welcome back to the show.
So I don't know where you want to, where you want to go. You may want to start off with some questions or,
Maybe we could give a little background on, this is day 54 that Santos is gone.
yeah, yeah, good for you. Yeah, so today is 54 days ago. Um, our our director, my co-director of the Tamarindo Foundation here in El Salvador, Santos, was arrested. Um, at the time he was arrested, he was accused of being a member of a gang as part of President Nayib Bukele's plan to sort of clean up the whole gang situation in El Salvador, where since 2 years ago in March, so it'll be 2 years now, he put into effect what he calls the Régimen de excepción, which is the suspension of civil liberties and habeas corpus. And over 100,000 people are being imprisoned right now here in El Salvador. So you could say, and there's two sides to it, like, well, he is getting criminals off the street and he's being applauded for it, I mean, honestly, El Salvador, people talk about our civil war, to give you the background, but the gang war was as brutal and as violent and as long-standing as the Civil War. So, of course, people, well, at least 85% of the people were saying this is, thank God we have the gangs off the street. But the problem is, and the president has admitted to this, that there have been mistakes. There are innocent people being held, and some innocent people being held for over 2 years. Santos's case, he's being accused of being a drug dealer and a member of the Mara Salvatrucha. And this is a guy that's been working with me since he's 10 years old. He's now 42. He really is what the kind of person that the president talks about, someone who's committed to his community, guy that has worked through sport and community organization, has worked incredibly hard all his life to create a new El Salvador. And as I told someone in the government recently, they've arrested the teacher. So what it means is that there is no investigation. The idea is that he's being held pending an investigation, but there is no investigation. And the judicial system has not been able to meet the demands of the Régimen. The Régimen de excepción has given resources to the police to get people off the street, but equal resources haven't been allocated in the area of investigation and the area of in terms of the judicial system,
Well, because
there's not enough
that's not the point, right? The point is just to get people off the street. There's no like trial or anything or evidence. Is that right?
So, well, and I'm not even gonna I won't even go. I can't make that conclusion. The conclusion is to stop the gangs at all costs.
Yeah.
Okay. But the problem is that it's like casting a huge net, you know, and you're fishing for wahoo, but you nab everything else in the net. And it takes a while to get everything else out of the net. The problem is that this wide net being casted to bring criminals in off of the street. Thousands of people have been picked up, and Santos is one of them. And when the government tells you that, they say, no, if you didn't do anything, you'll have nothing to fear. But 54 days later, in Santos's case, in a very tough penitentiary, and in some cases, people are being held for over 2 years without due process, without habeas corpus. And I think that's a tragedy, and I can't accept, since as well, it's a small price to pay for the good of all, but destroying, a young professional, somewhat young, 42 years old. He was 42. He passed his 42nd birthday in the penitentiary on February 17th. But I can't accept well, when will the investigation begin? 60 days, almost 60 days, 2 months in. When will he have a hearing? He was given his first hearing, was a virtual hearing with 90 other detainees. And remember, prisoners here also have no access. Their lawyers cannot meet with them. They have no communication with the outside world, no visitation, nothing. So Santos was given no time at all to even consult with an attorney who we're using to defend him. But there was no opportunity for defense. No opportunity for defense. He was given allotted 3 minutes. I think it extended to 5, where the judge just sent him and the other 89 detainees back to the penitentiary.
Were you there? Were you there?
No one is permitted in.
Yeah.
Santos was held. The hearing, he was inside of the penitentiary in Iztacalco, and the defense attorney and the judge were in a courthouse in San Salvador, almost 4 hours away. So that's it. That's it. Next hearing for Santos on the books will probably be in August of 2024. We petitioned the court. We're waiting to get a response for a special hearing for Santos's case. He merits a special case, being, someone who has devoted 32 years of his life to teaching, organizing, improving the quality of life, everything that the government talks about, and he's the guy. He's actually doing it. He's actually doing it. He's even the director of sport for the National Institute of Sport for our region, which is all about creating values, anti-drug policy, but through action. So anyway, we're hoping that the Attorney General will hear his case and give us a a favorable resolution in terms of at least allowing him a conditional release, and then they can investigate, whatever they need to investigate. And then we've even offered to pay a bond. There's no reason why Santos needs to be held a day longer in the penitentiary. One, for a crime he's never committed, but there's no investigation. That's all we're saying. Come and investigate. Here we are. Please come and investigate. This really is an incredible guy. He's like my son. I think he's someone you even knew
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, I remember him well
long,
from
long
2000.
ago.
Yeah.
Long ago when you came as a student. So that's kind of the situation. In the meantime, arrests continue in the communities. The idea of taking the gangs off, ending the gang war. But again, there needs to be, it needs to be extended. Not only there needs to be three parts to the story, right? Arrests, investigation, and a judicial system that will deliver justice. Seek the truth, and so that's what we're requesting right now from the Attorney General's office. But we're waiting. There's just thousands of cases. There are thousands of cases. The backlog is extraordinary, and there wasn't, I don't think, inside of the plan that was even calculated, and I don't want to say that there was never an interest in really, but one needs to say, well, what did they think would happen? You just lock people up and keep them there, and the only contact the families even have with the penitentiaries is once a month. Families need to, here in El Salvador, we have to provide the detainees with their basic supplies. So we're allowed once a month to go to the penitentiary, and there's a list of products that are permitted in. We put them in a clear jumbo garbage bag, and Santos's name is put on it with his prison ID number, and we go up and we wait. And we were there last month. Thousands of people online, mostly very poor people, and you go up and you just hope that your loved one is still there, and if they're not there, then you don't even get the information of where they are. So there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems with the whole situation, which continues, and then there are other questions about the legality of it all. But I'm just looking at it from the very human perspective of, through the experience we're having with Santos, a community leader, a teacher, a coach, a dad, a husband, an extraordinary guy. We asked, how about this in El Salvador? People are very afraid, and that's just a reality to some part of the country. Others are applauding while others are living in fear. We're definitely on the fear side. And kids are leaving here every day to go to the United States because they don't want to get picked up. And I wrote the other day that, and we're told by lots of people, well, if you didn't do anything, which is really what probably the logical thing is, if you didn't commit any crime, you shouldn't be afraid of anything, right? Well, that doesn't apply here, because one can be picked up for any reason at any time. And it's as simple as, I don't like you. I called the police anonymously and I said, Ank's a drug dealer.
Yeah, he's part of a
And then
gang.
the next day, they show up in the middle of the night or whatever time they want to, and they take you away, and then that's it. And with the suspension of habeas corpus, They don't need to prove anything. You're just gone. And once you're in, it's very, very difficult. I mean, just to get through the line right now, like in our case, which is a very strong one. I mean, we asked people in the region to come and sign a petition saying, to attest to Santos's character. Thousands of people came and signed for him. Thousands from the region, put their names and their ID numbers, and in a country that people are very afraid, he's that well respected. People are amazed. And lots of people, of course, have left. Young people, mostly young men, have left the country or gone somewhere, and their attitude is, wow, if they did that to Santos, I mean, what could happen to someone like me? It's very I mean, it requires a transcendental spirituality right now,
Well, yeah, I mean,
to
that's, unsurprisingly, that's what I want to talk to you about. That's like
I
why.
know, and that's the background. And I one could become trapped in their fear. One could be trapped in their fear, or one could be trapped in their anger, or their quest for vengeance. Every day I read the three major newspapers in the country, and it's filled with that. A lot of hatred, a lot of vengeance. We just had two elections, a national election and the municipal election. And I've been here 40 years, and it's always been that vitriol, that hatred between sides, the rich, the poor, this party, that party, and vengeance, and vengeance. And 40 years down the road, it's gotten us nowhere. And how do you create something new when it's still being fed by all the hatred? And the other night we pray a lot, and it's really funny, like even saying that word is it makes me almost feel uncomfortable, because it's always thoughts and prayers, and yet how many people actually practice prayer, meditation, but I actually do. And the other night we were in a meeting with adults, and I said, and I've been focusing on this passage, and actually I have it painted on a banner in my center, and it says, "Do good to those that harm you. Do good to those that harm you." Essentially, ama a sus enemigos, love your enemy, do well to those that hate you, bless those that curse you. Bless those that curse you. And I was praying the other night with these adults, and I said, and let's pray for the president. And one woman who has two of her sons in jail, she says, yeah, I'll pray that he gets killed. And I said, no, Julia. That's not who we are. And that's not going to get us anywhere, We need to pray for this transformation, right? Of all this hatred. And if there's wrong, that somehow we find ourselves to do right, And I think that's where I'm really moved. I had an opportunity to actually meet with the president's brother, and I took him. I held his hands and I said, I'm praying for your brother. praying for your brother, um, that he finds the way to make this right, you know, and there's a woman, Santos's mother, is a very, very old woman, and she also prays in the same way, you know, praying for the president and his family, you know, while her son is in prison and others have fled because of fear of being arrested. And I think that's the only thing that trans that that transcendental experience of moving beyond this hatred, this vengeance, even though maybe very one-sided, perhaps one-sided, and yet I think it's who we are ultimately.
In a way, it's I mean, just because I know little bits of your story, it's both the teaching that has been happening all along. It's like the test of the teaching since you've been living in Guajira. And also it's what you learned from like being a Jesuit, being a combatant, and being involved in the peace accords, right? It's like you're not saying this from any kind
Well,
of naive perspective.
no, I mean we had that experience. There was a 12-year civil war here, and I remember I just remember the the language of those days. Was always the rich against the poor, and the poor were always right, and the rich were always wrong, and then you learn that that they're really one story. I'll never forget this story, and I got in trouble for this. There was a schoolhouse was blown up here. This was in the war, 80 something, and I mean, literally, these kids were sort of impaled, and their their remains were um, plastered against an adobe walls of the schoolhouse. It was horrible. And I remember talking to a religious leader. Let's just leave it at that. He's now gone. He's now dead. I went to talk to him, and I told him what happened. What we saw, and this is the religious leader. And he says to me, trying to understand the bombing. He said to me, was the enemy was the enemy there? Was the enemy in the community? And here I am. Who am I to tell a religious leader, anything? If I said, the great question, who's our enemy?
Yeah.
I said, who's our enemy? And I think being around that 12 years of war, and it's interesting, and the president may have be very correct, President Bukele, when he says that the war really never ended, and that the peace accords were really, they stopped the bombing, but the war really continued because we never grew beyond our hatred. And for many people, it was about vengeance. And I think we're seeing that all over the world, here in El Salvador, certainly in the United States, this idea that, you screwed me. When I get in, I'll screw you, and so until we move beyond the hatred and the vengeance, and and there has to be justice as well, right? I get that. But here in our case, Um, we're not, there's now the vengeance against those gang members who committed horrible, horrible crimes, right? But the notion of restorative justice, I think of the work of Father Mike Kennedy, who works in the prisons in California, and is a contemporary of Greg Boyle, Homeboy Industries, it helps gang members find another way of life. But here we have Santos, man, the 54 days in the penitentiary, and he's not the only one. Every day there's stories, about mothers saying, my son was a professional soccer player. My son was a school teacher. My son was this, or my daughter was this. And so I don't know, even in our program, which is our program, I feel like it's been reduced. And we keep talking about, back to that passage about doing good to those that harm you. And ultimately, that will be the only thing that will transform, that will transcend maybe our very natural sense of wanting revenge, and it certainly requires great humility and discipline and practice. And we're also entering the month of March, where two very important, prominent figures were murdered. One in 1977 and the other in 1980. In 77, this Jesuit priest Rutilio Grande that began working with campesinos in a rural community called Paisnal, mostly sugarcane workers. And this was a very nonviolent resistance through education and the practice of meditation and prayer. And of course, they killed him because violence only knows violence, and violence doesn't know what to do with nonviolent resistors. And the other was Oscar Romero, the Archbishop. And that certainly embraced, that believed that we can transcend our own violence and our own, quest for revenge, it's interesting, it's like, and we're spending a lot of time this month. We will spend a lot of time this month really reflecting on their lives, right? And this was, current history for us. 1980 is not that long ago,
Yeah.
right? And but yeah, we need more nonviolent resistors transcending this hatred with love and service to one another, and there's a new book, by the way, out, Phil Berrigan,
Oh,
one of the great nonviolent teachers, that people should look that one up.
a ministry of risk.
Yeah, that's it. That's the new one. Yeah. Collected teachings, writings of Phil. That's kind of where we're at right now, it's challenging. It's challenging. It's like, the Nina Julia's that, her kids have been in prison now for almost 2 years. No hearing, or that one initial hearing, and then they're just gone. And I can't justify that, and in any way that there's no justice, a hearing, representation, due process. None of it. And people say, well, those people don't deserve it. And yet, but who decides who deserves and who doesn't?
Yeah, unless you have that, you don't know. But it's so
Right.
tempting, it's like anything that we grow up with or take for granted. Of course, it's so tempting to be like, oh yeah, the ends justify the means or and for the sake of efficacy. But when you don't have those things, then there's no way to know
Well,
anything.
at the short term, but that same, I think Phil Barrett had said you just can't do a little bit of violence.
Hmm.
So this could solve it right now, but this situation that in this hatred or this revenge, under the guise of justice, um, will come back and against us. It doesn't solve the issue, right? And the other issue is um, someone like Santos that's really spent his whole life trying to change the conditions in which, you know, kids go into gangs, kids go into drugs, kids go into crime, lack of opportunity. This is what Santos's whole life has been about, and I would I would love someday when we get Santos out of prison that President Bukele would meet him, you know, and I'm sure they'll embrace. I have that great hope. I'm sure they'll embrace when President Bukele can see the kind of person Santos is, and he goes, this is the son that this country needs. This commitment, you know, on the ground commitment to transforming people's lives by creating spaces of love and opportunity and education and critical thought. And, I still believe that. There was a great Brazilian poet, Bishop Pedro Castadália, who's now gone, but he gave me a candle once and he goes, don't ever, Juan Giuliano, don't ever lose the notion of utopia. He goes, and when you do, goes, light this, it's a purple candle. He says, light this candle and get back to work. So we're trying to continue Santos's work here while he's away, but with the hope, hopefully that he'll soon be given his freedom.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful vision, John. It reminds me the first time I went to live with you in El Salvador. Do you remember what you had on your fridge in that era?
I really don't.
It was the cover of some magazine. I don't know, Time magazine, Life magazine. I don't know. Maybe it was a newspaper. And it was a pope who had been shot,
Oh, that picture. Guy
kneeling.
that tried to kill, yeah, John Paul II, the guy that tried to kill him, and the Pope went to see him and forgave him. That's what that picture was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think that's it. I think that's what the world needs, and it's like, it's not popular, you know, because I think a lot of us fail that practice of humanity, and that to be able to take, true prayer and meditation, that transcendental prayer, that transcendental meditation, that's really it should be a requirement of being, or maybe it is a requirement of being fully human. Because especially now we can get so lost in the news or reality TV, whatever people do.
Yeah. It's
And
not it's not popular, but I mean, look where the popular shit has got us.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten us anywhere. We're more isolated. We hate each other more. Um, I really have a hard time when someone says, and probably maybe some of your listeners are probably going to go, "Who is this guy?" But some people say, "Yeah, I stopped talking to Steve. He's a trumper, and I just won't. I won't sit. I can't talk to him." Wow. Now there's a problem. There's a problem. Um, I think we have to be able to engage with each other regardless. And Yehulia, wants to pray that's he prays harm on President Bukele. You know, that's not who we are. You know, I don't want harm to happen to President Bukele. I want to engage President Bukele. I want President Bukele to see broaden his vision. You know, uh, help spaces like ours solve some of these problems. He has a real education problem. He has a real problem with families. He's a healthcare problem. Stuff that isn't necessarily even solved by money or by a larger budget, but it's about human investment.
Yeah.
People like Santos that have, devoted their life to remaining in the community, digging in. You told me once that Gandhi's vision of social work is going into these villages and staying there and digging in. And I think we forget that, that real change requires a lifetime investment. And there's no short-term anything. And I think that's what we see one administration to the next. President Bukele's here another 5 years. He may do another 5 years. He may do a lifetime. Okay. But in the end of the day, though, that teachers and spiritual leadership and guidance and facilitation, those are the things that need to happen in communities. And it's not popular because it's hard, because you can't put it all in a spreadsheet. You know, you can't, it's very hard to measure, right? And we're always looking for, those, how to measure things. But the work of the soul is a lifetime. And I feel that more now during this time, you know. Um, and there are people that love the president, hate the president, but somewhere in all that, they're just people, right? And uh, and then what's lies and what's truth, but at the end, they're just people that are really trying just to make it. Kids that come here every day that learn something or play something, or I don't know. But I think that I'm in my office and I'm looking at uh, a picture of John Lennon on my wall. Like love is the answer, right? It really is, absolutely. And in a place like El Salvador, absolutely.
It's amazing to me, John. It's really amazing. You're just it's like you're living the dream. You're living the Gandhian dream of being totally, totally fucked and oppressed and and responding with love. It's such a
And
bizarre
and,
thing.
and isn't that isn't that the test? You know, back to that reading, and maybe this helps the understanding of Gandhi. I'll go to this one. Says he goes, look, um, I mean, anyone could love the people that they love, or anyone could talk this way, in good times, right? But it's in your face, right? That when you're really, you know, it's easy to forgive the people that you love, but the people that really don't want to understand you, or the people that we don't want to engage with. And I think I've met with everyone, man. I've met with chief of police, investigators, just and the idea of bring more humanity into the whole thing. Of course, we want
That's
Santos
what's
out.
it's so
What?
powerful. I mean, and maybe I don't know if it's totally clear to the people listening, but like you could get deported now any day just for trying to get Santos out, or just for being involved with like a youth program. And so it's really like
I mean, it's
every
happening in
day.
Nicaragua. It's happening in Nicaragua. I just read this morning. Um, Ortega just shut down another 13 NGOs, and I think yeah, people like us, they'll take us away, arrest us, and then they'll deport us to get rid of us, But it's like, again, yeah, it's not about me, but yeah, I mean, it's very you know, I mean, but what are we saying too? It's like we're not plotting anything. We're saying, um, yeah, Mr. President, we'd really like to talk to you, you
Yeah.
know, and help this situation, help these families. And he's aware. He's aware. They're all aware of, a lot of people that are being held. I think it's like gridlock. It's like gridlock. If you've ever been in Manhattan, all of a sudden there's gridlock, or even probably squim on a bad day.
Where
You
a
know,
car physically cannot move out of an intersection. That's
you're
what you mean.
just
Yeah. Not
you're
the
just
metaphor, but
stuck. You're
yeah.
just stuck. And I think right now, in a way, the system is stuck. Okay, 100,000 people in prison. Okay, We're not even talking about that situation. I'm talking about the legal system. They just can't. They can't process all these people. There's just too many. There's too many cases. There's not enough. There's not enough judges. There's not enough resources in that area. And then the idea of investigation. And I had someone off the record say to me, he goes, John, we just don't have the resources to even investigate all these cases. And what they do is, something happened here during the war, and I think I mentioned this earlier. I think we started, but if someone has something against you, all they need to do is call in, and then you're gone. And then during the war, though, that would happen, and people were killed for it. I know a guy that had an issue with another guy because he was with his partner or something like that. Kind of a romance thing, and he waited for revenge, justice, revenge. And he went to a commander and he said, and there's all kinds of stories like this. People have told me these stories. He says, hey, this guy did such and such, broke the rules. And of course, in those days, you broke the rules, they just kill you. And here in the community, it's a shame that there are people being paid to give information, but they're not necessarily really working on behalf of if the president's plan is to remove the country from criminals, but they're not working that, they're working, from their own vengeance or their own hatred or who knows what. But they're just saying that, just giving people's names. And the fact that Santos is on this list, these lists that exist, or, the other day there's a kid here who's a high school student, and he's on a list, I mean, he really is like the quintessential altar boy. He is, you know, I mean, um, that's dangerous. And then the fact that they could arrest you without any real, and they say, they say, hey, no one gets arrested without any proof. But there's no habeas corpus here. There's suspension of habeas corpus. You don't need proof, you know. So, I mean, that's something that we hopefully, in loving dialogue, that we could open up the conversation about that. How do we change that situation? Let's start with that. Let's give these people fair trials and investigation. There's no investigative process. I keep repeating it because it's so frustrating. We have a 54 days of Santos in a very tough prison. I think I sent you a video of what it looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, really? I've been here to investigate this guy. He's here working every day in the community. They can come and talk to him. And, we've sent all his numerous degrees and his accomplishments and all the people that have vouched for him to the court. But the court, there's no one has the time to even read it. There's such a long list, of people. How do you jump the line? Maybe that's not fair either. Maybe there's lots and lots of people ahead of Santos
Yeah.
that need to be heard. The cases go back over 2 years. But that's a situation, El Salvador, that those that are applauding what's happening here, okay, but now let's go beyond, the first act, right? Now let's go beyond the first act. Now there's the story continues. There's a story now behind that, that blitzkrieg of action. Thousands and thousands arrested. But it's funny, but people are being arrested in places like this, where there's people are poor, where people don't really have a voice. There's not a whole lot of support for people here.
So maybe like bring it in for me a little bit, John. I like the act, rather than trying to fight the past. Or one of my other mentors, Ken Cloak, says, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. So we've had this. We've had Act
I
One.
like that.
There's no undoing Act One. But like, given the tools at everyone's disposal, what should Act Two be? Like, where do they go
Well,
from here? They can't just like
the
let everyone
president.
out. That'll like
No,
that
no,
won't
no,
work for
no,
them.
no, no. I'm not saying that. I think the
Yeah.
president needs to. I think more resources need to be put into the police in terms of investigators. Uh, raise the bar. I mean, if there are too many cases to investigate thoroughly and properly, then you need to retool officers to become investigators. They need to bring in more investigators. That's, and they always say, look, we'll investigate the case. Santos, of 54 days, there hasn't been one person that has come to this community to ask one question. No investigation. And we could say, well, because they're working through 1,000 other cases, and that's probably the case. I'd like to think that's the case. Benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
They're working on other cases. Well, they need more people to do that well. you
Yeah.
know,
So Act Two
let's
is like
get
a
better.
massive influx of personnel in the legal system to like do all these
And
hearings.
then we could talk about, the court. So if the courts are so backed up, and again, uh, uh, look, there's lots of money to do lots of things, but let's empower more judges, you know, um, to try these cases. You know, I think the vice president said on an interview, on actually, I think it was on public television, in the United States, whatever. What's that called? Whatever.
PBS?
Something. Yeah, on PBS. Yeah, it was on. It was a PBS interview with the vice president, and he said something like, "To try all these," and the interviewer said to, she said to him, she says, he's a lawyer, and she says, "Can you do a just hearing with 500 people?" And he said, well, basically the answer was, yeah, we have no choice, because if we were to try all these people, it would take 90 years. Well, then I think you need to address that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the problem.
I mean, that's what makes sense to me. And again, and I'm honestly, I'm walking, he's the president of the country at this point, right? He just won. He won 85% of the vote. Only 49% of the population voted. So he probably won about 42%, really. That to say 85%,
Sure.
it's whatever it was, whatever the number, doesn't matter. He's the president of the country. He'll be president for the next 5 years. And other people say, well, he got into the presidency illegally. He changed the Constitution illegally. There were six resolutions or six articles in the Constitution that prohibited that. But that's a whole nother conversation, right? But the point is, Act Two needs to be investigate the arrested, or investigate them prior to having them arrested, because we were told that, look, everyone that gets picked up has already been investigated, and that's why they're getting picked up. Well, that is not the case with Jose Santos Alfaro. And then the judge situation, I mean, there has to be a judicial system that at some point, there has to be due process. It can't just be because some guy up the street said it, so it is, and that's it. Put someone away for 2, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, 30 years, you know? So I think that's what needs to happen next. And I don't know what else to say. And to keep doing what we're doing. I mean, we're talking to a lot of parents about really watching their kids right now. Watch the things they have on their telephones. Uh, Kids did this this is I don't even probably getting it right, but some gang symbol. And kids at the high school here last week got arrested. 10 of them. 7 were released, I think, yesterday or the day before, but 3 that made those symbols on their telephones, I don't know if they're gang members or not, but they're making these symbols on the telephone, right? They're gone. Now will they? I mean, it's. I don't know what to tell you, man. It's a scary place because, like I said, um, the old adage, if you didn't do it, you don't have to worry. Well, here you could just be walking down the street, man, and someone said you did it, so you did it, and
Yeah.
that's it, So anyway, it's a scary thing. It really is, and it could be better.
Yeah.
It could be better. The president says his party's called New Ideas, and part of the new ideas has to be a better way of policing, a better way of and he may say, well, you're from another culture, you're from another country, which is constantly his argument. Oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm
Um,
here. Yeah.
but yeah, but I think, I mean, in the name of all that's good and right, right? Let's get this part right. That's my hope.
Yeah.
So I'll continue to pray for the president.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
I'll continue to pray for those that hurt us, you know. And there's a beautiful prayer on our wall, and you know, talks about, you know, see, I will try to understand and not necessarily seek to be understood. I will love and not necessarily seek to be loved, and I will forgive even when I'm not forgiven. I mean, that's revolutionary. Everything else is just rhetoric.
If you like this episode, you can join the 10,000 Heroes Club, our own community of purpose, by clicking the link below this video. You'll never miss an episode, you'll have opportunities to nominate the people I interview and the questions I explore.